Bobby Fischer was one of the most talented chess players of all time. At only 7 years old, he decided to start spending 14 hours a day studying chess. This led to him quickly rising up the ranks, playing the game of the century at age 13 years old, and then challenging for the World Championship against the Soviet chess machine all by himself in 1972. In this Game 5 of the World Chess Championship, Fischer showed his positional brilliance. He even wins the game with a stunning brilliancy that you're just going to have to see for yourself. So we jump into the game. To set the scene, this was played in Reykjavik, Iceland, back in 1972. It was sort of a neutral ground. Fischer versus Spassky for the World Championship. Spassky, of course, from Russia, and Fischer from the United States. So this is almost seen as a Cold War over the chessboard. So it was bigger than chess, this match. That's why it was called the match of the century. So we see d4 played by Spassky. Obviously a more positional approach to the game. Knight to f6. Then we see c4, almost inviting Fischer into this Nimzo Indian. So there we go. This time we do see knight c3 on the board. Nimzo Indian is a very theoretical opening. I actually played this with the black pieces myself. The idea is you pin this knight to the king, and it makes it a little bit harder for white to get ideas e4 and kind of sort of controls white's center with your pieces instead of with your pawns, because you can see black's setup is a little bit small here. So we see knight to f3. And as I've highlighted here, black has a variety of options. You know, we have castles, slow play it. You can go d5, strike back in the center, and that actually transposes into an opening called the Rogozin, which is sort of a variation of the Queen's Gambit, which these sort of d4, c4 positions basically all sort of Queen's Gambit-y stuff, where it sort of takes all the center that you can, because obviously you can't play e4, so he settles for d4 and c4, because obviously the ideal center is e4, d4, but you take the compromise center with d4, c4, still very strong though. And as we can see, Fischer didn't decide to go for d4, didn't want a Rogozin, he went c5, sort of striking back. But the move has one drawback. The bishop is now sort of out of the game. So we see e3. This bishop is going to have to take at some point. Knight c6. Gets the knight. The bishop's now defended at least. Bishop to d3. Quickly puts some pressure on this pawn if black decides to castle that way. And also this bishop, this is a nice hut. You know, whenever you have pawn chain like this, you always want to have your good squared bishop. So this in case the light squared bishop is very open and quite an active piece. This dark squared bishop, however, not so much. We see bishop takes c3. B takes d3, and then we can see the positional idea of this opening as well. As long as putting constraints on white's center, what has black done? He's exchanged his dark squared bishop, and then look at all white's pawns. Dark square, dark square, dark square, dark square. This dark square bishop is not going to be very happy at all. He's basically forced white to put all his squares in that colour complex, and then traded off his bishop. So it's quite smart from a positional standpoint as well. So we see d6 by Fischer, ready to get that light square bishop into the game. Also defending that c-pawn a little bit more. e4. Finally, Spassky's able to play e4 and that bishop is out of the way. And now Spassky's center is looking pretty tasty. So we see e5. Fischer wants to sort of chip away at it, but he's happy if he plays d5, because d5, we see knight e7. And now look at the center. It's just completely closed and ready for Fischer to attack. Maybe later on he could go b5 or something like this, or either side probably going to want to play for f4. Probably white here, because white is the initiative in this position. But these knights, it's not too bad. This is not going to struggle to get back into the game. So like knight g6 and go to f4 or something. It's pretty happy, you know. The center closing is sort of equal for both sides. It's rare in chess to get something that both sides want, but here we do in fact see that. So we go knight h4. The idea is, as aforementioned, since white is initiative, he wants to play f4, get some good play going against black center, because black center is pretty strong as well. So he decides to get that knight out of the way. h6 played by Fischer. This is interesting. It seems like a weird move, but you're actually preparing g4 in this position. And if Fischer gets g4, let's face it, you're never going to get to play f4 if you're Spassky. So Spassky thinks, crap, I'm going to play f4 now. Strikes back in the center, f4 on the board, and we see a very interesting move, you know. I think a lot of beginners in this position would just choose to snap take, and then maybe takes back. But I mean, this is allowing too much play. Your center is just diluted. This dark square bishop, which you have desperately tried to not let back in the game, is back in the game. And in fact, it's biting you in the ass. Look, your d6 pawn, you're going to be defending that to hell's end. It's an isolated pawn. It's got no pawns around it. It's not a great decision for you to do. So Fischer, in this position, decided to in fact go knight to g6. Now, of course, this white knight is undefended. So Spassky thinks, damn, well, I can't lose the knight. I don't want to move it back. And playing something like b3 looks like a weird concession. If you're castling that way, there's a few light squared weaknesses there, because obviously I can quickly jump in that with bishop to h3, get my queen in there. It's going to be a bit nasty. So then we just see knight takes g6, and Fischer saw all of this, the line being f takes g6 has all happened in the game. f takes e5. After d takes e5, bishop to e3. Fischer is quite happy. Of course, this pawn is attacked. Got to defend that. Castles, castles, and we're left with this sort of positional middle game. You know, this game's not going to be over too quickly. But Fischer did have some brilliancies in his back pocket. a4, played by Spassky. a5 by Fischer. Just shuts that down. Classic play. a4, a5. Just sort of make sure this pawn isn't happening, instigating on the queen side. Not going to happen on Fischer's watch. Now we see Fischer's let's go bishop is pretty good here. You see he's got this whole scope of this quite long diagonal. Maybe we can pressure the queen. Maybe we can pressure the king. This knight is quite good. These pawns are very easy to target with the knight. If he's even hitting that one right now, moves like knight g4, knight g5 to knight f4 is all going to be happening. But look at Spassky's pieces. So it was a dark square bishop that was bad. Now look at his light square bishop. Very unimpressive. Sort of caged in by his own pawns, stuck behind them. It's quite tricky to get that into the game. So we see rook to b1 played by Spassky. And then we see bishop to d7 by Fischer. Of course, the queen defends that pawn. And now putting a little bit of pressure on this a4 pawn, thinking, well, that's quite weak. You know, there's no pawns defending it. You're going to have to commit pieces there, and I'll just naturally develop while attacking you. So we see rook to b2. Spassky prepares to double his rooks, not here, but this way. So then we see rook to b8 played by Fischer, defending his pawn here. Now his queen is freed up to move, so this game is about to kick off. Rook b to f2, pressuring the knight. But here you have to watch out. There are mistakes to be made. You don't want to be playing a lazy move, such as, I don't know, queen e7. Maybe you want to play against this pawn. But then you might run into a move such as bishop takes h6. And of course you can't take that bishop because you can take the knight. And then we've takes, and white is simply one exchange. There's still venom here. It's not a dead position. See, bishop c2 played by Spassky, just defending that pawn a little bit more before it's really going to kick off. g5 played by Fischer. Finally, that's on the board. He's been wanting to play it all game. The thing is, now it blunts the bishop and also creates some useful squares because his queen is probably going to want to go to g6, maybe even h5, maybe reroute the bishop here, put some pressure on this queen. There's a lot of options now. So we see bishop to d2 played by Spassky, just sort of getting the bishop out of this d3 square, freeing that movement for his pieces, and also he defends his pawn, but that's not really going to be an issue. Queen to e8 played by Fischer. Now wants to get his queen in the game because, of course, it wasn't doing very much. So we see bishop to e1. Now Spassky, I guess this is sort of this is the waiting game part of the game. He's sort of waiting to see what Fischer does. He doesn't want to commit himself. Doesn't want to make any moves that might weaken his position. So bishop to e1 played. Queen g6. Then we see queen d3. Now Spassky the queen is free from the defense of the pawn. The both bishops are just sort of staring at it. The queen can sort of get back into the game. Knight to h5, offering the exchange of all the rooks. That actually happens. Rook takes f8, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, rook king takes f8. Sorry, and then we see bishop to d1, threatening this knight. Now Spassky's dangerously close to trading off into what seems like a pretty dead drawn position. I know if you're 1200, as Levy would say, you'd lose this position with both colours, but in a World Championship level, I mean, this game was played at 98 accuracy and 90 accuracy respectively. Fischer playing at 98% accuracy, so they're not going to be losing this position very easily. But of course, Fischer, I think the match was about even at this point. He only had one win in game 3, so he needed a victory here. And with the black pieces will be quite the way to do it. So we see knight to f4. Bang! I'm sure you saw this move. Best way to get knight back in the game. Also has a bit of tempo in the queen. If you 800s watching this, love a bit of tempo in the queen. And of course, look at this knight, so well defended. How are you ever going to get a knight out of here? Queen to c2 played by Spassky. I think he must have wanted to keep protecting his king side, but this is clearly, it's just a terrible move. Because it allows for a brilliant sacrifice. Maybe you can think about this. What does this allow? Maybe think of the lines. It's quite an interesting move. I hope maybe you found the move, maybe you didn't, maybe you're just watching along. We see bishop takes a4. Brilliant tactical combination from Fischer. And the idea is, you can't take that bishop. If you take with the queen, then I have queen takes e4, and this is actually forced checkmate. You can make checkmate a bit longer with some queen e8 crap, but let's just do the mate in 4. Obviously, threatening mate here and threatening mate here. The queen can't come back and defend. Say if you try and come back to defend, then I just have mate on the back rank. So how do you defend this? You have to go king f2. This is a very ugly move. And after knight d3 check, picking up one of these pieces, you've got king g3, queen h4 check, king f3, queen f4 check, king e2. And then you have a beautiful knight checkmate here. Knight c1 mate. Of course, the queen cuts off all the squares. And also, knight cuts off d3. So that's a beautiful mate there. And you think, well, what if you don't accept the sacrifice? You can just move your queen, can't you? Well, if you go for the best move, queen b1, still keeping an eye on that pawn, then again you still have this move, queen takes c4. This pawn is simply not defended. And after something like queen to f2, this is the engine's best move, then you've just got bishop takes g1. You're just losing material because obviously this skewers the two pieces. And if you, so you can move the queen, but there's not too many squares you can go to. If you go here, well then you've just got bishop takes d1, queen takes d1, and then queen takes e4, again threatening this mate and this mate. So if you try to come up to defend like this, you're gonna lose your queen. So we say queen to d2, and you just got knight takes g2 here. Fischer's just won back 3 pawns for the cost of, and also the bishop. So let me see if you can maybe do bishop to f2 here, and you just got knight f4. You're just down pawns, your king is so weak, your position is very uncomfortable, and in fact, if you want to exchange, like, wait, aren't I winning the piece back? Sadly, not. So you got queen takes f2, you've got queen e1 check, got to move the queen back, takes and takes, and then look at his position for Fischer. He's got so many pawns that these ones are doubles, they're isolated, this pawn's completely isolated. You can just start pushing your a pawn, get your king in the game. It's a very easy win from a brilliant tactical shot from Bobby Fischer. Holds up to this day, 98% accuracy. And I hope you guys enjoyed that game review. So if you want to see more like this, there'll be a video popping up somewhere around here that YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy the most. So probably good to give that one a watch if you enjoyed this. Maybe give me a like and subscribe or comment for what you thought about this game or what games you want to see next. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next